Hello. In this video, I'll be showing you a different way of adding material to your floor. This might be slightly easier for beginners to edit um, their floors and to edit their patterns in general, just simply by treating it as a regular layer. So what I'm going to do here, right now I have the plan layer, which I'm going to recall or rename to plan. And I have the hatch layer, which is the wall hatches. Right now, I'm going to start a new layer by pressing on this plus button at the bottom. And I'm going to rename it by double clicking on it and call that the floor or bedroom floor or sitting room floor, whatever kind of flooring that I want to have. Now, the next thing is I'm going to go back to my plan layer and I will use my magic wand tool and I will start picking the area that I want to be selected as a part of the floor. And right now, we'll notice that if I use the magic wand tool, because I have an opening right here in the dashed line, it's selecting the entire space, and that's what I want to avoid. So to deselect, I'm going to press on Command D for Mac or Control D for Windows users, and I'm going to go to the Marquee tool. Alternatively, I can press on the M button on my keyboard, and the Marquee tool will be activated. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully zoom in and make sure that I will be selecting my space that I want to be as part of that floor. So I will make sure that I zoom and I'm just pressing on my mouse, a long press, and I'm moving my cursor to the side of the screen so that it automatically pans me or takes me to the opposite end. So right now, this is where I want my selection to be. So I'm going to remove my finger from the selection. And then I'm going to make sure that I am using the floor layer right here. And I'm going to give it any color I want. So I'm going to use the bucket tool, which is this one, or alternatively, I can use G on my keyboard and I'll end up with a bucket tool. If this is not your bucket tool, then you have to long press here. Make sure that you choose the paint bucket tool right here. You can choose any color you want. It can be white, it can be red, it can be any color that you want. So I'm going to use white right now. And I'm going to make sure that I am on my floors layer and I will give it a color. Right now, my floors layer is given it has a sort of like a white base or a white canvas. I'm going to deselect. So I'm going to press on Control D on my keyboard or Command D if you are a Mac user. I'm going to go to this floor layer and I'm going to double click on this gray area next to the floor layer. It's not on the text and it's not on the icon, neither on the eye icon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click right here with my mouse in this gray area next to the layer. And I'll end up with a layer style menu. So right here, I can go to my pattern overlay. So I'm overlaying a pattern on top of that white space that I just painted before. One thing you need to notice is that if you just tick and untick your layer in some versions or your style, on some Photoshop versions, it will not automatically take you to the options of that style. So alternatively, you will be on the blending options and whatever you change here is not going to take effect there because it's not ticked to start with. So I'm going to make sure that I'm clicking on the pattern overlay tab and it turns into a lighter gray color. And I'll click on this drop-down menu and start adding the layer that I want or the pattern that I want to be added on my space. So say I want to add this pattern right here. I can play around with the opacity. So I can make it transparent or opaque. Now, given that my background is white, then this is absolutely transparent and it's showing the white background that I added to the layer. I'm going to keep it to 100 and I'm going to go forward to the scale and I can play around with the scale that I want. So I can make it larger or smaller. And that completely depends on the kind of material, on the picture, on you as a designer. Now, I can also play around with the angle if I want it to be at an angle. And you can see how it's taking effect as I play with it. Right now, I want it to remain at the 0 angle. And I can also play around with the blend. So I can make it look more transparent and so on. But again, given that the background is white, nothing is going to change, or the effect that I want is not going to take place. So I'm going to keep the blend mode to normal, and I'm going to click on OK. Now, this is a part of the layer. So if I change my mind and I wanted to add, for instance, this wood flooring to this sink area, all I have to do is go back to the plan layer, choose the Marquee tool or the magic wand tool, whatever tools you want, make your selection. Right now, I need to add a little bit to the selection. So I'm going to click on Shift and select. Okay, and I'm going to go back to the floor. Again, the bucket tool. And once I paint this area in any color, it will automatically take the layer style. So right here, it's still white, but because I added this effect where I have pattern overlay over anything that is drawn or written or is on this layer, so it's going to take that effect. So what I'm doing is I'm adding to that layer. So I'm giving more canvas and more background to that layer so that it takes this background that is stuck to this layer. I hope this is clear and it makes things easier for you. Now, the next question, I'm going to just undo here because the floor does not look good in comparison to the function of the space. So the next question is, all my furniture has disappeared. There are multiple ways of fixing that. You can play around with the blend of the layer. So you select the floor layer and you start playing with the blend of the layer. Now, depending on the kind of the layer, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. What I find easier to do is to just drag this plan layer on top of the floor, and I have my furniture on top of the floor layer. Now, naturally, the furniture is on top of the flooring, so the wood should not be showing, the wood material should not be showing behind the sofas or behind the tables. And this is where I need to start adding more layers and either adding pictures of my sofas on top of the floor layer, or I can subtract this selection from the floor layers. So what I can do is go to my magic wand tool, select my magic wand tool, and then start selecting the areas that I want to be excluded from from my selection or from the floor, like so. It's going to take a while. It takes patience to work with Photoshop and editing photos. I'm also going to select this part. So maybe right here, the Marquee tool might be a bit faster. So I'm just going to make sure that I carefully select my the area that is below my furniture units. And right here, I'm clicking on my Shift button on my keyboard so that it adds to the selection and it does not start reselecting or restarting the selection. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to go over this part and I'm going to be selecting it. I'm also going to be selecting this part right here. It's probably not going to show anyway, but we'll just keep it as is. I'm going to go to the floor layer and I'm going to hit the delete button on my keyboard. So now I excluded these areas from the floor layer, and therefore they will not take the material that I don't want to be applied to that area. Now I need to start adding layers. I need to start adding layers so that I either put pictures of my images if I have these pictures, or I can start adding colors and playing around with shade and shadow of my space. I hope this helps. And if you have any questions, of course, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer them.